Hi, I'm Jessica,
And I'm Tracy.
and this is She's on Top, the place where we celebrate and elevate women.
And today we are thrilled to be speaking with Fatima Zaidi, the CEO and founder of Quill Inc, which is a one-stop marketplace for podcasters.
Fatima is an expert on closing the deal with over 10 years' experience on business strategy, development, and sales.
She is a keynote speaker at events around the world alongside entrepreneurs like Gary Vaynerchuk and most recently Richard Branson. And she's won a variety of awards, including 2 Top 30 Under 30.
This is part one of our interview with Fatima, where we focus on her invaluable advice about sales. In part two, she's going to talk to us about how to create and market a podcast, and that'll be released later. So you'll want to stay tuned for that as well.
Hi, Fatima.
Hi, it's great to be connected again, Tracy and
Yes.
Jess.
We're so happy to have you here. We have so many questions we want to answer, we want to ask you, but we will try and be selective because we just think you're a fountain of knowledge. We're like, oh, we're so excited.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We wanted to talk to you about your latest project, Quill, but we wondered if we could start actually a little bit with your history, because especially in our network, sales is a huge deal. It's what everybody struggles with. And you've got such expertise in this area. So I was wondering, we were wondering if you could talk a little bit about the company that you were with before you started Quill, because your success story and your growth in 1 year was phenomenal.
Well, thank you so much for that. Success is such a, I feel, arbitrary term, and it means, so many different things to different people. I think for me, I've always been really passionate about making money. And I know that can sound almost very superficial, but I think if that's not your answer as a salesperson, then you probably need a new calling. And it's not just about making money for myself, although who doesn't love a healthy paycheck? It's, I would say, more or less about contributing to a startup's bottom line. And so prior to Quill, when I was at 88, before that, I helped start a dress rental company and have been in sales, corporate and startup for a really long time. And I think what just got me really excited and woke me up and really motivated me to put my best foot forward was the fact that you saw the fruits of your labor almost immediately. And it ended up being such a transferable skill when I decided to start my own company. It's probably one of the most lucrative careers that I could have been in before deciding to start my own passion project.
That sounds amazing. Now, you are an expert on closing the deal. Can you share, I know there's so much information, but can you share a few tips on how someone can be more effective at sales on closing that deal?
Well, the best piece of advice I got when I was just starting out in my career from a mentor was the best way to be a salesperson is to not be a salesperson. And I, think that has been sort of the mantra that I've followed through with since the beginning. I've worked extremely hard at my personal brand, as well as becoming a thought leader and a subject matter expert, and most importantly, providing as much value as I can to my community. And so it's very much a long-term play. I think anybody can learn the ins and outs and technical aspects of a CRM tool, automating your sales functions, figuring out the algorithm, and moving things through the sales pipeline. That is very much a skill that you can learn. But I think things like building your personal brand, building organic relationships, one handshake at a time, providing value to your network, those are things that are definitely a much longer term play. And so I probably started working on that part of my sales tactic almost a decade ago. And I would say that now sales has become a lot easier over time because it's been a combination of not just outreach, but also becoming a subject matter expert and credibility. So I would say, being in sales is such an emotional roller coaster. There's days that you're on top of the world, days you've hit rock bottom. There's the constant no's, the constant rejection, constant doors slammed in your face. And I find a lot of people will typically take that rejection personally, but good salespeople have the ability to understand that getting your ducks in a row take way more work than commanding them to line up. And so my advice is always to people out there, when you're looking to hire a salesperson or even any early stage employee, during the early days of your company, hire someone with true grit, hustle, and resilience. Those skills matter much more than the fancy resume with bells and whistles.
It's so smart. Now, for us, a lot of the members, women that we work with, they're solo entrepreneurs. So they have to wear that hat themselves. And it's a real struggle, because even though these women are incredible, they built their brands out of passion and they believe in it, and whether they're selling a product or a membership, sales is uncomfortable for most people, So what do you like could you give us tips, or what are common mistakes that you must have seen the mistakes as well as, yeah.
There's a few, I would say, mistakes that I probably would want to highlight up front. The first is not using a CRM tool. Multiple sales studies have shown that just by being on a CRM tool like Nimble or Insightly or Salesforce, depending on the size of your company, you are increasing your sales productivity by 64% and increasing your sales revenue by 34%. That's just by being on a CRM tool. So already you're at a huge disadvantage by not being on one. So if you're going to do one thing for yourself and for your business in the early days, get on a CRM tool. It's not expensive. I pay $20 a month for Nimble, and there are some really great free ones out there too, like HubSpot and Insightly. So highly recommend doing that. The other thing that I would say is, I know that sales is extremely uncomfortable for most people. And I would say there's days that it's uncomfortable for me. And I've been doing this for a really long time. I think a lot of people typically procrastinate or shy away from the things in their business that are typically uncomfortable. And so understanding how fundamentally important it is to put your best foot forward and to sort of tackle it head on, knowing that it's not a function of your business that you could ever outsource without mastering yourself, or typically something that you can get by. No company's ever been successful without having a really lucrative sales engine and pipeline. So you may as well prioritize it and get it done and get it out of the way.
That makes a lot of sense. One thing that we keep hearing over and over again is that the story of your brand is so important to selling your brand. So can you talk a little about that, about how important that story is?
When I look at women in my network, actually, when I look at anyone in my network, I always find it's the women who are afraid of being too promotional, too opinionated, too aggressive. And I couldn't agree more that the system itself is flawed, but I think we can counteract a lot of that by advocating for ourselves. Oftentimes I find we are so great at branding our clients or our companies, but we fail to take control of our own personal branding careers. And, essentially we are CEOs of our own brand. That's the way that I look at it. And everybody has a personal brand. Everyone does. It's what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. And so if you're going to have some sort of a narrative, why not control it? And it becomes such a vital part of whatever it is that you do, whether you're looking to hire, whether you're looking for a new job, whether you're looking to, close a deal, whatever it is that you're looking for, your network will know you for your personal brand. And so I always like to remind people to take credit for their ideas, put up their hand. Everyone suffers from imposter syndrome. It's completely normal, but no one else has more or less of a right to be doing exactly what you're doing. So you may as well just go for it.
And could you give women a starting point? So if they have their sales tool, like that you just mentioned, how do you start the conversation? Because you don't want to come out of the gate, cold calling is so hard, or when you're reaching out. So you don't want to come out of the gate and be like, want to buy my product? Like it's a process, right? Did you have like a particular line that you started with, or one that you feel is effective?
So my thing with cold calling is it's completely acceptable to do so if you have a solution that you're actually providing to people. So I think it's interesting, like with Quill, we create podcasts for companies. And so when I reach out to companies where I don't necessarily have a relationship, it's not that I reach out and say, this is what our company does. I will create a very customized email or one pager or pitch on why I think a podcast could be extremely valuable for their company and why they should consider adding it as a marketing tactic during the pandemic. And so I think most marketers or salespeople or CEOs who receive those emails or touch points from me may not necessarily need my product or service, but I think they can appreciate the value of a tailored, researched, customized pitch. And it doesn't feel cold at that point. I always say cold calling is only a cold call if you haven't done your homework and you aren't prepared. And so if you're copy pasting blanket emails and blasting them out to people in your network, you're not going to have a very high success rate. So take the time, maybe pick one or two people that you really want to get in front of and do your research. Find out if you have connections on LinkedIn that are mutually in common. If you don't, see if you can provide value to them in some way. Maybe the first touch point isn't sales. Maybe it's, I read this article that you had written and it really inspired me for XYZ reason. Or I have a podcast on the side and I'd love to interview you for it and build that relationship organically. Or, I'm writing this article for my blog and I wanted a quote from you. I am read this article and it reminded me of your company. There's so many touch points that don't have to do with that direct point of transaction. It's all about building relationships that are authentic and less about asking for something in the first touch point. And so my rule of thumb is do something for someone 4 times before you ask them for something in return.
Oh, I love that advice.
It's so brilliant. I just want to say one quick thing because Tracy's got a good one, but because I want to move on to Quill, but I wanted to say this do you think anybody can learn to love sales? Because do you think that's possible?
I think that, if you become good at something, it's hard not to love it. I love sales, and I know that not everybody feels that way, and maybe you don't end up loving it, but you are always going to understand that it's the most important part of your business. And so it's kind of irrelevant if you love it or not. You have to learn to sort of tolerate it. It's almost like that bad relationship that you have with a colleague, whether or not you love them or that client that you work with. You're not going to love everything and every function of your business. I feel very grateful that I do. I recognize it's not something that everybody sort of shares a sentiment with me, but I would say that because it's so important, you should learn to embrace it.
I love that. There's like so much great information here. I'm not sure if you can even do this, but if like someone, doesn't really love sales, but is there one mantra that you could give to somebody that would sort of summarize what it is about being good at sales or, selling your brand?
Oh my goodness, there's so many mantras.
Yeah, it's a tough question, I know.
I would say, don't ask, don't get. If you are someone if you're just waking up and procrastinating every day and you have your to-do list and sales is not on that to-do list or you keep pushing it down, if you don't ask, you'll never get. Similarly, there is such a direct correlation with every deal that I close. When I sort of connect the dots looking backwards, I would have never guessed that a sale would come in through one opportunity here and another opportunity here. And so I have always been extremely open with I will talk to people in the grocery store line about podcasts. I will, I'm also the co-chair for Sick Kids. And so that's actually a huge passion project of mine where I'm raising, along with my co-chair, $25 million for Tech for Sick Kids. And I will literally pitch people until I'm blue in the face, but, never assume that there is an opportunity or window that may not lead to anything. I have actually closed corporate donations standing in grocery store lines. And so you never know when a deal will come through. So be open and don't ask, don't get.